പിൻ വീഡിയോ കൊടുക്കാം അല്ലേ?
Participants, kindly turn off your audio.
ഇതാണ് ആപ്പ്. ഇതാണ് സൂം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആപ്പ്. ഒന്ന് പോയി ഡൗൺലോഡ് ചെയ്യുക കേട്ടോ.
Good morning, one and all. With great pleasure, we welcome you all to the national webinar on India and its neighborhood in contemporary times, economic and political perspective, jointly organized by Department of Economics and Department of Political Science, Christ College Autonomous, Iranyalakuda. This webinar is an opportunity for all of us to get an insight on India's relationship with its neighborhood. For that, we have with us two eminent resource persons, Dr. S. Shaji, Faculty, Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad, Telangana.
Matter whether you are staying in the richest country and the most advanced
Excuse me, Anne Mary, kindly unmute your audio.
Good morning, one and all. With great pleasure, we welcome you all to the national webinar on India and its neighborhood in contemporary times, economic and political perspective, jointly organized by Department of Economics and Department of Political Science, Christ College Autonomous, Iranyalakuda. This webinar is an opportunity for all of us to get an insight on India's relationship with its neighbors. For that, we have with us two eminent resource persons, Dr. S. Shaji, Faculty, Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad, Telangana, and Dr. Rajesh K., Faculty, School of Management and Entrepreneurship, Kerala University of Fisheries and Ocean Studies, Kochi. Let us start the webinar with a silent prayer. We have with us Reverend Sister Rosie Vio, Head, Department of Economics, Christ College Autonomous, Iranyalakuda. I welcome you, Reverend Sister, for the welcome address. Sister, please take over the session.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to one and all. Respected Principal, Reverend Dr. Jolie Andrews, respected resource persons, Dr. S. Shaji, and Dr. The Indo-China relationship has elements of cooperation and competition, but also of conflict. For India, China is a major strategic challenge, and China, India has become increasingly important in recent years. Now we have eminent speakers to discuss about it. First of all, I would like to welcome Reverend Dr. Jolie Andrews, Principal, Christ College, Iranyalakuda, who is delivering inaugural address. We are lucky enough to have a very enthusiastic person and also a good initiator as our principal. Father is a very good motivator and always ready to be with us in all our initiative as a guide. Father, I welcome you to this webinar.
Thank you.
It's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. S. Shaji, Faculty of Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad, who is one among the keynote speakers of this webinar. He has served as faculty to the Institute of Political and Social Studies, University of Würzburg, Germany, and also of US Foreign Policy Fellow at Study of the US Institute Program at Bard College, New York. Currently, he is the academic coordinator of Study in India program, University of Hyderabad. His area of research interest includes India's relation with developing states, especially from the Afro-Asian region, and technology transfer and foreign policy of developing states. On behalf of all, I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. S. Shaji to this webinar. Next, here we have Dr. Rajesh K., Faculty of Fisheries Economics, School of Management and Entrepreneurship, Kerala University of Fisheries and Ocean Studies, as one of the keynote speakers of the webinar. He is formerly Assistant Professor at College, Kerala for 7 years. He has worked as scientist in economics at Rubber Board under Ministry of Commerce and also worked as a faculty member at ICFAI National College, Thrissur, Kerala. His area of research interest is in coastal tourism and impact on economy and environment. I extend a very warm welcome to you to this webinar. I also welcome all the participants for their overwhelming response to our webinar. I would like to thank Dr. and Dr. Rajesh for receiving our invitation and making this event a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sister. Now I would like to invite our beloved principal and chairman of the webinar, Reverend Father, to the inaugural address. Father, please take over the session.
Good afternoon to everyone. Today, as you know, we are having a webinar conducted by the Department. Am I audible? Am I audible and am I visible to everyone? Am I audible?
Yes, Father.
Okay, thank you. Today we are having a webinar that has been organized by the Department of Economics and Department of Political Science, jointly organizing a national webinar, especially India and its neighborhood in the contemporary times, the economic and political perspectives. We have had our resource persons as Dr. S. Shaji, Dr. Rajesh K. here. Eminent personalities who are coming from the Hyderabad and also from the Kerala University of Fisheries and Ocean Studies. As we know, the India has got a wonderful relationship with its neighbors, especially in the contemporary time. As the HOD, Mr. Rosie Vio, has rightly pointed out, we are seriously and critically thinking about our relationship with China, one of the major global players. And now we also got good relationship with the countries of the SAARC and the surrounding countries. We being a member of non-aligned movement in all the times, and has got the relationship with even the two blocks coming from earlier world orders, from the capitalistic and the socialistic bloc, I would say. Now we are thinking in a way critically about our relationship, about our trade relationship, our economic relationship about all these countries. I'm very happy we have got very eminent personalities who are presenting the theme of today's webinar. In this occasion, I especially congratulate the Department of Economics and Department of Political Science who have come forward in order to organize this webinar. I especially thank Sister Rosie Vio, the HOD Department of Economics and the Organizing Secretary of webinar, Muhammad Ajmal, the Joint Organizing Secretary, Dr. Franco Di Francis, the Organizing Secretary of this webinar, and the other committee members who are there actively organizing this webinar. A word also about our Christ College in Yalakoda, where perhaps the biggest campus, I would say, the largest number of students who are now enrolled in the Christ College, perhaps in Kerala. As you already know, we got a host of variety programs. We got the relationship with the neighboring colleges also, which helps us to become one of the academic epicenters as far as the research and academic progress has been concerned. We also got a wonderful, lush green, beautiful campus here. Now, I welcome everyone, and formally, I wish all the best for this coming together of this academic exercise. May this coming together help us to come and arrive and to read some critical thinking about our relationship with our neighbors, and let this webinar be eye-opening to all who are coming together to attend this webinar. Once again, wishing you all the success. May I remain. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Father. Now let us move on to the sessions. I would like to invite our resource person, Dr. S. Shaji, Faculty, Department of Political Science, University of
Yes.
Hyderabad, Telangana, for the session. Sir, please.
I can start. I can start,
Excuse me, madam.
right?
Hello. Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Please ask the
Please start
participants
here.
to unmute mute the mic for the good morning session.
Dear participants, kindly mute your audio and also the video so that we can conduct the webinar smoothly. I request all the participants to kindly mute your audio and video.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. A very fine good morning to all of you. At the outset, I would like to thank Christ College Iringalakuda for inviting me to this webinar. I personally thank the principal of the college, Father Dr. Jolie Andrews, the head of the department, Sister Rosie, and the organizing secretary of the program, Dr. Franco J. Francis, and the co-organizing secretary, Muhammad Ajmal, who's a faculty in the Department of Political Science of Christ College, Iringalakuda. I'm extremely happy to be in Christ College program today. It's one of the prestigious colleges in Kerala. I heard a lot about this college from my student days onwards, and Christ College Iringalakuda always stands out as one of the best colleges in the state. Now let me go into my presentation. I'm going to speak on India and its neighborhood in contemporary times, a political perspective. Since there is a speaker who's going to follow me, will speak broadly on economic issues.
Excuse me, sir.
I will be confining my points to the political and strategic aspects of India's neighborhood. When you talk about India's neighborhood, one has to have certain kind of broad understanding of what constitute India's neighborhood. As we all know, India is a state which is primarily located in South Asia, which has 8 countries, including India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. So broadly, it is considered to be a South Asian state. So South Asia is actually a prime location for India's neighborhood. At the same time, the maritime Indian-Ocean region, or maritime Indian-Ocean region, which is closer to India, is also part of India's neighborhood. So China and Myanmar are not officially part of South Asian institutional arrangement, do share border with India. In that sense, India's neighborhood consists of all the South Asian states and China and Myanmar, along with a maritime Indian-Ocean region. The maritime Indian-Ocean region has, which is related to India, has a little broader settings in the sense that it has an eastern wing, which is called Eastern Indian Ocean, and also there is a Western Indian Ocean. So this is So this is a picture of India's neighborhood. When you look at India's neighborhood, especially when you talk about India's position in South Asia, we can see that there is an India-centric nature. For instance, the region is largely dominated by India in terms of its geography, in terms of its economy, in terms of its socio-cultural system, so on and so forth. If you take the geography, around 3/4 of the entire region of South Asia belongs to India. So is the case with the economy. And the cultural aspects like religion, ethnic groups, you know, the caste groups and so on and so forth, the social, you know, the factors are spread across the South Asian region. So the point I'm trying to make is there is an India-centric nature in the region. Therefore, India, because of its centrality and its capabilities, always dominated the region. Therefore, India's relations with South Asian neighbors also had certain kind of trajectories. I would say that India's relations with South Asian countries followed certain kind of zigzag nature in the past, in the sense that there were phases of cooperation and phases of strain or conflicts, especially with India's smaller neighbors. Overall, India's relations with the smaller powers in the region were friendly in nature. Most of the times, I also pointed out that there were phases of strain and conflicts in the past, but most of the times it was friendly in nature, especially after India's independence. But when it comes to India's relations with countries like China and Pakistan, there has always been a different kind of dynamics in operation. With China, India had a friendly ties in the early period after India's independence. If you look at India's relations with China in the 1940s, when China became a communist state in 1949, India was one of the few countries to recognize China in the Committee of Nations. And in the 50s, India and China went into a phase of cooperation, which was evident from a treaty which India and China signed in 1954, which is broadly called as the Treaty of Five Principles or the Panchsheel, and the harmonious relations that these two countries built in that particular period. But India and China entered into a war in 1962, which was actually a major kind of setback in India-China relations. So there was always certain kind of strain in India's relations with China after 1962. Maybe in the last couple of decades, the situation has improved a lot. I will come to that point later. With Pakistan also, India had more or less same kind of trajectory. There were phases of strains and or conflicts, and then, you know, which was actually accompanied with intermittent phases of peace. So with China and Pakistan, there were different kinds of relations which were in operation, but most of the other South Asian countries, like say Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, India had more or less friendly ties, partially because these countries were also dependent on India for their own sustenance in the realm of economy or strategy and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to point out is that if you look at India's relations with its neighborhood, there has always been different kinds of trajectories in operation at different points in time. So India started off with friendly ties with all these countries, partially because India also shared, or the other countries and India's jointly shared certain kind of concerns because of their common experience of colonialism. Therefore, certain anti-colonial ideas and slogans around anti-racialism, anti-imperialism were the cementing blocks between India and its neighboring countries in the early part of their post-colonial phase, and which actually helped them in supporting each other in decolonization movements and so on and so forth. Then when it came to the international arena, most of the South Asian countries, and for that matter, many countries in the Indian Ocean region, were broadly supporting certain kind of international vision, which was, focusing around non-alignment, the ideas of third worldism, South-South cooperation, and so on and so forth. So the most important factor about India's relations with its neighborhood in those times was India promoted, along with South Asian countries, a certain kind of multilateralism in international arena. But as far as India is concerned, there was certain kind of emphasis on bilateralism in the period of Cold War. So what I'm trying to suggest is that if you look at India's relations with its neighbors, there are two distinct phases. One phase which was broadly the phase which started after India's independence and continued up to the collapse of Cold War in 1991 period, and a phase which started after 1991. So from India's standpoint, India supported multilateralism at the global arena along with India's neighboring countries to a large extent, except maybe a few exceptions are there. I'll come to that point later. But India emphasized more on bilateralism in its own region. So this is the most significant aspect. India's foreign policy towards neighborhood was mostly around bilateralism, where India was promoting multilateralism at the global arena during the period of Cold War. And with certain countries, like for instance, China or Pakistan, India had different kind of trajectories, because to a large extent, India's relations with these countries were also shaped by how these countries struck their alliances or ties with other superpowers in the system. For instance, Pakistan's connections or relations with United States was actually an important trigger for India to build closer ties with the Soviet Union. So was the case with China. So there was always a principle of balancing, which was actually acting as the trigger for building or shaping its neighborhood policy towards countries like Pakistan and China in the past, especially in the Cold War period. However, in the post-Cold War period, which broadly began in the 1990s, India's foreign policy underwent tremendous changes. And these changes were broadly in tune with the changes which were happening at the systemic, which is like international level factors, or and with the domestic level factors. So the international level factors which shaped India's foreign policy in the post-Cold War period were the collapse of Cold War binaries, spread of globalization, increased degree of regionalism. And at the domestic level, the factors which prompted India to shift its foreign policies were the introduction of economic reforms, arrival of coalition politics, India's own nuclearization, and so on and so forth. So because of these factors, both systemic and domestic level factors, India's foreign policy underwent changes, and those changes were broadly on the 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 strategies of non-alignment, India's policies towards the Western Bloc countries, for instance, India's relations with United States, Western Europe, and so on and so forth, that underwent drastic changes. India also started changing its strategies on regionalism and so on and so forth. So in the context of a larger changes which were happening in India's foreign policy, India was trying to look at its neighborhood differently. For instance, more significance was attached to India's own neighborhood, because India's strategic calculation was that in order to emerge as a major power, India has to have a stronger standing in its own region. So India came up with different kinds of policies and strategies in this period. For instance, in the 90s, India came out with a strategy of reaching out to smaller powers, even on the principle of non-reciprocity. The case in point is the Gujarat Doctrine of India's foreign policy of 1996. India was trying to reach out to the smaller countries without expecting the reciprocity from others. So the trade was made much more attractive to smaller countries, except in the case of Pakistan. In the case of Pakistan, India insisted on reciprocity. So similarly, India's relations with China improved drastically since 1991. I'm talking about India's relations with China in the 90s and the early part of 2000s and to a period closer to the 2020. There were different treaties between India and China signed on border conflict, and many of the territorial conflict issues were addressed through various institutional mechanisms. The treaties which were beginning from 93, and then subsequently also there were treaties with China in 96, 2003, and so on and so forth. So there were always certain kinds of efforts on the part of India to reach out to its neighbors. As a result of all this, the trade has improved. The relations between these countries have gone tremendous changes. So except in the case of Pakistan, the relations with India's relations with its neighborhood was more or less in a harmonious way in the last 2 to 3 decades. With Pakistan, of course, the security-related issues and other kinds of political conflicts continued, and there were several phases. The conflict touched a certain kind of high intensity, and therefore there's a certain kind of strenuous relationship is being continued in the case of India-Pakistan relations. But when it comes to China, till very recently, the relationship was considered to be very friendly and harmonious. And 2020 June, to a large extent, was a watershed in India-China relations, because India had a conflict with China, the direct physical conflict with China after a gap of 45 years, which actually changed the neighborhood power configurations in a substantial way. To a large extent, this particular kind of development, or this particular development that is India's recent conflict with China has made India to rethink or recalibrate its foreign policy, especially its neighborhood policy, because the new realities are emerging. And one of the important global changes or systemic level changes which is happening right now is a sort of emergence of a new Cold War between United States and China. And that would have certain kind of implications for India's neighborhood policy, because for very long time we have been talking about neighborhood first policy and so on and so forth. As part of that, India wanted to have better ties with its South Asian countries, neighbors, and the maritime Indian Ocean states, so on and so forth. But right now there is a new situation emerging that can have a certain kind of implications for India's neighborhood policy. So in other words, the new Cold War and the China factor would have certain kind of implications for India's neighborhood policy. In this particular context, we need to look at India's conflicts with other neighbors. For instance, India's relations with Nepal has also come under certain kind of debates in the recent times. There is a being talked about.
So, sorry for the inconvenience. Our resource person is facing some technical issues. He will be back soon. Participants, please wait.
Hello?
Sir.
Okay, sorry, I think there was some technical issue. Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
So the point I was talking about was that India's relations with the smaller neighbors are also being influenced by the emerging new realities in international arena, which is characterized by the rise of a sort of new Cold War and the China factor in India's neighborhood. In this particular context, in my understanding, India is most likely to recalibrate its foreign policy responses to its neighborhood, which would revolve around certain ideas like promotion of a multi-vector foreign policy. It means India would be investing its foreign policy in multiple powers rather than being attached with one, in the sense that India would have ties with equal and stronger ties with countries like United States, Russia, Europe, and Southeast Asian countries, so on and so forth. India would also try to promote certain kinds of multilateralism, in the sense that there would be a lot of emphasis on building new regional frameworks and strengthen the existing ones. And there would be also a lot of emphasis on India's diplomatic initiatives, and people often talk about a new diplomatic offensive is required, in the sense that India has to communicate its foreign policy initiatives in a bigger fashion in order to attain certain kind of effect in the international arena, which India is doing, but much more importance will be attached to that. Along with that, there would be enormous significance being significance is likely to be given to the application of soft power in India's neighborhood in terms of its cooperation in the areas of education or the cultural aspects and so on and so forth. Apart from all this, India would have to take certain kind of measures in order to strengthen its hard power. So in this way, in this fashion, India would be bringing in a multi-pronged strategy in order to deal with India's neighborhood, in order to address the current issues. That's what I would like to point out as part of my presentation, and stopping. Thank you for a patient hearing.